What's up, everybody? Doomwake here, and welcome to another Modern Metagame. I know we haven't done one of these in a while, but that's because with the new job, I've been working Monday through Friday and haven't really had a lot of time to go ahead and set up the Modern Metagame. But with a Monday off, today's a holiday, so I figured why not do another Modern Metagame, because we haven't done one in a while. Before we continue, make sure to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to let me know in the comment section below what you thought of the video. So we are going to be going over a few events today. For those of you who don't know what the Modern Metagame is, we typically just take a look at the big events that happened on Magic Online, sometimes paper if they are available, kind of break down the top 8 deck list, what's doing well, and then after we look at each deck individually, we kind of put all the top 8s on the screen at one time to kind of get a bigger picture of the metagame. So we got 3 events today. We have the weekly Saturday and Sunday Magic Online challenges, as well as a Super Qualifier that happened on Sunday as well. So let's get started with the Saturday challenge. Alright, so starting off with the Saturday challenge, we have kind of a blast from the past here. The winner of the event was Glimpse of Tomorrow combo. So the idea of this deck is to play a Cascade spell, either Shardless Agent or Violent Outburst, and Cascade into the Glimpse of Tomorrow, thus kind of dumping your hand onto the battlefield. Sometimes you can Omnath and get a couple of landfall triggers that way to cast another Cascade spell and kind of just keep going up until the point where you've put a Chance of the Forge into play, have enough creatures to just kind of attack your opponent for lethal. The cool addition to this deck is Karn the Great Creator, which is one I have not seen in these deck lists before. And it really gives you some additional utility, and it's actually another Cascade spell because Shardless Agent is an artifact that you can get from your sideboard. So that's really cool, and if you're into the combo sort of thing, this might definitely be the deck for you. We got an Azika's Chariot, which can also be a threat in and of itself with Karn the Great Creator. So that's first place, Glimpse combo. Second place, we got some Is It Murktide? Not a ton to note here. No more Blood Moons in the main deck, 4 Archmage's Charm. I think this is kind of what Spike was doing. 4 Archmage's Charm, 1 Snapcaster Mage. There's a Prismari command. I think Spike was playing Fury, but the idea of playing 4 Archmage's Charm, the full complement, is definitely something that has not been that popular, in the past couple of weeks. So that's something to note here. And then in the sideboard, we got a Kozilek's Return. That's a new one, I think. Explosives, Blood Moon, the 1 Jace, a lot of the stuff that you're used to. But yeah, Blue-Red Murktide with 4 copies of Archmage's Charm in second place. And in third place, we got some Grixis Death Shadow. I think this is fairly straightforward. The same creature base, 2 Kroxa, 4/4/4 Shadow Channeler Ragavan, 4 Thoughtseize, 2 Inquisition, 2 Dress Down's main deck, the 1 Command, 2 Push. Sometimes you see a Bolt Push split there, but everything else is pretty much stock at this point. Sideboard, maybe some different stuff here. A 3rd Kroxa, a 3rd Dress Down. Turoks are pretty standard. The 1 Pirate Spellbomb might be a little different. So there's some small differences in the sideboard here, but for the most part, the main deck is not really changing. But third place, we got Grixis Shadow. Fourth place, we got some traditional burn, very, very straightforward stuff here. 2 Lightning Helix and 2 Skullcrack. Those are kind of your flex spots. Everything else is pretty standard for us. Even the clean 20 lands, along with, I think there's 5 sack lands. Yeah, the Fiery Outlet is the 5th sack land, which does kind of make sense. I like that. Deflecting Palm. This is a Lurrus deck. Remember, if you're playing burn, don't forget the Lurrus. 3 Vortex, 3 Smash, 3 Sanctifier. Just a really clean deck list. But yeah, this is, we're kind of used to this at this point. But fourth place, burn. Finally, something to spice it up here in fifth place. We got Spider Space, who was playing Indomitable Creativity, but not maybe the Indomitable Creativities that you're used to. So we've decided to omit the no Primeval Titans, no Emeralds, no Serra's Emissaries, and we're all in on Archon of Cruelty, which I do kind of like, because if you think about from a reanimator standpoint, Archon is the best thing to be reanimating, so it kind of stands true that it's probably also the best thing to be creativiting into. I can't imagine you lose many games where you creativity X equals 2 and put 2 Archon of Cruelties into play, so I kind of like that swap. Something to consider. Also, Archon's a little bit more hard castable. You have a Blood Crypt, you have Prismari command to make treasures, so you can definitely hard cast that more easily than you can maybe Serra's Emissary or Emrakul, certainly. But a lot of the Planeswalkers, 4 Teferi, 4 Ren and 6, 2 copies of Jace. We got only 3 hard evidence, which I find a little bit strange. 4 ending, 4 creativity, 3 Fire Ice, 2 Bolt is the kind of our removal split, 3 Remand and a Spell Pierce. And then we do have an Emrakul in the sideboard, which not only is good against mill, but there are going to be some matchups where maybe you want access to the Emrakul to be able to creativity into it, so that's definitely cool. And also the Black Splash gives us Thoughtseize in the sideboard, which is another thing to consider. So that is 5th place, creativity. 6th place, we got some elementals, but this is maybe not the elementals deck that you're used to. So typically, when you associate, Risen Reef with the pitch elementals, you would assume Kahira is the companion. Well, we've ditched Kahira and added 20 cards because we're a Yorion deck. I actually kind of like the way this looks. The extra cards that you're adding, like if you think about the traditional elementals deck, Ren, Teferi, Fury, Muldrifter, Omnath, Reef, Solitude, these are all cards that you would normally play anyways. So the cards that we're adding are just kind of some generic removal spells like Lightning Bolt and Prismatic Ending. We're adding Eladamri's Call and Oath of Nissa as kind of cantrips that just kind of smooth out your draws. Oath of Nissa is also a really good one with Yorion. And this is kind of a deck that just, if you look at the cards in the deck, Yorion's just kind of a sicko in this deck. So it kind of all makes sense to why you would want to be a Yorion deck, and I really like this approach. I think if I were to play Elementals, I would definitely go ahead and give this one a shot. And sideboard, we got the Emrakul, the Promised End, which is something that we've taken from the 4-color Yorion decks, and we've implemented that here. But I'm a really, really big fan of what's going on here. I like a lot of this stuff. So that is 6th place, Yorion Elementals. 7th place, we are trying to attack people with crabs. We got some mill. This is, your pretty stock mill list, 4 Hedron Crab, 4 Ruin Crab. There's not a ton of fancy stuff going on here, just 4 of all the best mill cards, 2 Crypt Incursion in the main deck, 1 Into the Story, 1 Murderous Cut. Only 3 Visions. I think most people normally play 4, so that's definitely something to consider. But I think something I was listening to Demonic Tutors, who plays a lot of mill. He was talking about this on his stream. If you have a lot of graveyard hate, your visions get a lot worse. So I could definitely see trimming one of those. It does make a lot of sense. Sideboard's kind of interesting here. We got a rebuild, 2 Ghost Quarter, which I have to imagine is probably for Urza Saga. A Baleful Mastery, that's kind of cool. 3 Extirpate to go along with the Surgicals in the main deck. We got 2 Engineered Explosives, a Damnation, and then obviously rounding things out with the Lure. So that's 7th place, Blue-Black Mill. Then, rounding out our top 8, finishing it off here with some blue-white control. This is a... where's our companion? We do have a Kahira. Okay, good to know. And then 1 Jace, 2 Teferi, 3 Raveler, the 4 Solitudes. This is 1 main deck Chalice, 2 Dress Down, 1 Shark Typhoon. Some interesting numbers here. What I am a very big fan of, and this is, I actually follow Hey Pharaoh on Twitter, they are a big proponent of Fire Ice, and I think Fire Ice is awesome in control decks. So, bravo to that. I would definitely recommend playing Fire Ice if you're looking to play control. We have additional Chalice in the sideboard, a Verdict, some Purges for Shadow, a couple Rest in Pieces as well. That's the nice thing about blue-white control. It's one of the decks that gets to play both Chalice and Rest in Peace, so you can boast a pretty good Shadow matchup when you have Solitude in combination with both of those cards. So that's one thing I definitely like about the blue-white control deck. That's going to do it for Saturday's challenge. Let's go ahead and dive into Sunday's challenge. Alright, so we actually get to start off the Sunday challenge with a deck that I am very, very fond of, and that is Blue-White Affinity. So if you remember, yesterday I uploaded a video with this deck that was a VOD at the Twitch stream. I played this deck on the Twitch stream, had some middling results, but for the most part I liked a lot of what's going on. And this is kind of Affinity, but not a beatdown deck. It's more of a mid-range deck with the full complement of Thought Monitor and Thoughtcast. It's trying to play much more of a grindy type game, playing counter spells, playing more removal, like Portable Hole, 4 copies of Nettle Cyst. We are still obviously an Urza Saga deck because that card is busted. I believe this is the exact same 75 that I recorded the video with, so, if you want to check this out, be sure to go check out the video I uploaded yesterday. But yeah, this deck's sweet. There's a lot of stuff to like. I have been considering trying a list with Stoneforge Mystic, and I might want to explore that a little bit more just because I want a higher threat density, but for, really, really, really fond of this deck and would highly recommend it, and it won the challenge, so it can't be that bad. First place, Blue-Red Affinity. Second place, we got Blue-Red Murktide. This one actually does have the Blood Moons main deck. Remember, the last one we looked at did not have those main deck Blood Moons, so that's something to consider. Speaking of consider, I know, bad pun, I know, bad dad joke, you get it. 4 Unholy Heat, 2 Spell Pierce. So we're not playing any copies of Archmage's Charm. It looks like we have decided to omit those for Blood Moon additional cantrips, and then we're playing 2 Pierce instead of, I think there was a split of 1 Pierce and 1 something else in the last list. And then moving down to the sideboard, we have Subtlety, 2 Dispute, 2 Explosives, 2 Jace, 2 Dress Down. So a lot of the normal sideboard stuff, but this is Blue-Red Murktide with Blood Moon in second place. Okay, in third place, before we talk about this deck, I'm going to admit that I do not really know anything about it. So this is Lantern Control, and this is kind of the 2022 remix of Lantern Control. Obviously, we don't have Mox Opal. For the most part, what this deck is trying to do is lock you out by setting up Codex Shredder and or Ghoul Caller's Bell and or Pyxis of Pandemonium with Lantern of Insight. The combination of those two cards, you get to see what your opponent's drawing. You get to see whether or not you actually want them to draw that card. If you don't, you can mill it over. And then you set up a loop that way. You eventually lock them out with Ensnaring Bridge so they can't attack you. So basically they get to a spot where they can't attack you and they never draw good cards. So that's the idea, that's the goal of this deck. The really nice thing about the Lantern decks in the modern era of Magic is they get to play with Urza Saga. So they get to kind of play both sides of the coin. Sometimes with Lantern you get to these spots where you if my opponent draws like back-to-back-to-back perfects, maybe they can get out of this. But Urza Saga, if you don't have a bridge, you can just kind of shut the door with Saga pretty quickly. So I like that aspect of the deck. But yeah, there's a lot of cool one-ofs for Saga, and not a ton. We have an Elixir main deck, that's kind of cool. A map to go get more Sagas. And then, removal spells, discard spells, that kind of stuff. Stirrings to help find your combo pieces. And then in the sideboard, we got Leyline of Sanctity for, I think, discard spells and some other stuff. And then just some good sideboard cards, Nature's Claim, Torpor Orb, Kaya, which I assume lets you kind of play a different angle of attack if your opponent has a lot of Force of Vigors and stuff. But yeah, this is third place, Lantern Control. Fourth place, look, just because I haven't been playing it and posting videos on the channel doesn't mean the deck is still great. We have Temur Rhino, is probably my favorite deck in the format, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. So we have main deck Endurance, which is something that I've talked about before. Only 22 lands, which I'm not a big fan of, I think. Oh, but they have a Valakut Awakening. Okay, so that's kind of like our 23rd land. I've been a fan of 24. I think I'd maybe trim an Endurance and add a 23rd land. Also, no Gemstone Cavern, so I'd probably play at least one Caverns. But I do kind of like the main deck Endurances. Split of Bone Crusher, Borrower, which is not too bad. 2 Dead Gone, 2 Prismari Command, I like that split. A lot of stuff to like. And then the sideboard's a little bit different here. We got, in addition to Force of Vigor, we also have 2 Foundation Breakers, so that's more stuff for Hammer Time. And we also have 2 Ashiok Dream Render, which I think maybe they expected a good amount of Titan and Graveyard decks. I don't know if Ashiok is really that good against Shadow, per se. Maybe it's okay. That one is something that I'd have to kind of give it a test run before I put my stamp of approval on it, but I like the concept of it. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff here in our 4th place Temur Rhinos. 5th place, we got some Goblin Charbelcher action. This is a deck that has quote-unquote no lands, even though it's playing a lot of the modal double-face lands like Balagid Recovery, Shatter Skull Smashing, Turn Timber Symbiosis. So it has mana sources, don't worry, even though you see no lands. But basically it's trying to ritual, put a Charbelcher into play, kill you. You can actually stack your entire deck with Recross the Paths, because basically Recross searches and flips until you hit a land. You don't actually have land, so you get to flip your entire deck and then reorder it as you choose. So that's kind of cool there. And then looks like no main deck Blood Moons, and none in the sideboard either. I'm kind of curious about that. We do have the main deck Pyromancer Ascension. Oh, they have Magus. Okay, that makes more sense, because people are prepared for Blood Moon with Force of Vigor, so you can maybe sidestep that with Magus. That's actually kind of cool. Leyline of Sanctity for the discard spells, Veil of Summer for counter spells. So if you're a combo player, you got a couple of options here. We had the Glimpse deck in the last top 8, and then the Belcher deck here in 5th place. 6th place, we got some more Grixis Shadow. Pretty standard stuff. I think all of the numbers are the same with the exception of these 2 bolts. Sometimes you see 2 push, sometimes you see 2 bolts, sometimes you see a split of 1 of each. Everything else is the same. And then sideboard, some K commands, I think 2 Turok, 2 Spell Pierce, some Terminate, Snapcaster. So not a ton to talk about here. It's basically just these 2 spots are the only flex spots, but 6th place, Grixis Shadow. 7th place, we got some more Blue-Red Murktide. I believe this is the list that Spike was playing, because this is main deck Fury and 4 Archmage's Charm. Spike's been streaming this a lot on his channel over the past couple of weeks, and he's been a big fan of it. I actually kind of like Fury, main deck Fury in this deck. It gives you a higher threat density. It's not dead in some matchups like Blood Moon. Even when it doesn't have any it doesn't kill that much on the ETB trigger, it's still a really big threat, so it makes a lot of sense if the games go long, which they typically do when you have Iteration, all these counter spells. and everything else, just all 4-ofs. I love this clean deck list. Just all nice, clean 4-ofs with these 2 Furies and 18 lands. And then sideboard even more clean. All 3-ofs, Blood Moon, Explosive, Spell Pierce, Relic, and Trust Down. So I think I prefer this version of Murktide to the previous versions, but here in 7th place, a little bit of a different take on Blue-Red Murktide. And then rounding out our top 8, we've seen quite a few of these combo decks. Maybe it's a good time to be a combo player in Modern, but we have Oops All Spells in 8th place. Similar approach to the Belcher deck that we saw before. It's not playing any lands, it's playing all the MDFC cards, but it's utilizing them in a different fashion. So instead of killing you with Ritual and Belcher, it's trying to kill you with Balustrade Spy, Undercity Informer, mill my entire deck. You can either get a bunch of Vengevines into play with Salvage Titan and attack them that way, or you're going to mill over your Thassa's Oracle and your Memory's Journey. You Memory's Journey back your Thassa's Oracle, untap, cast the Oracle next turn. So you get a couple different ways to win there, and if your opponent has a lot of graveyard hate, you got the Charbelchers too, because again, we don't have any lands. So this might be a better approach than Charbelcher because you can kind of attack from 2 angles. I think it's probably like a turn slower than Belcher for the most part because it doesn't play any of the rituals or Ironcrag feats. Like Belcher can kill you on turn 2. This deck can't. So that's something to consider as well. But I do think this is more of a, maybe not streamlined, but it has more applications because it's better in other matchups and beats some of the sideboard hate. And then sideboard's pretty straightforward too, pretty clean. 4 Leyline, 4 Prismatic Ending when your opponent has a lot of graveyard hate, 4 Pact Negation for counter spells, additional Belcher when they have a lot of graveyard hate, and then Silence for the combo mirrors. So that is going to do it for our top 8. You'll notice there's a lot of combo decks and not a lot of Hammer Time, which is good. Which is a good sign. I think Hammer Time is Hammer Time falling out of favor is definitely makes me a little bit happy. But let's see if we can continue that trend with the Sunday Super Qualifier. All right, and the last event that we're going to be discussing here was the Sunday Super Qualifier. First and second place both get invitations to a set championship on Arena, and one of those qualifications is Grixis Death Shadow. Pretty standard stuff here. The 2 lightning bolts, again, is those 2 flex spots we discussed, bolt/push, and sideboard pretty much the same, so not a ton to talk about here. Maybe the Snapcaster Mage is different, but first place, Grixis Shadow. Second place, no, I didn't copy the deck list. This is Grixis Death Shadow again. However, the main deck is 1 card different, so we'll talk about that. Fatal Push and Lightning Bolt. Sideboard, we see no Snapcaster Mage. There's actually a couple different stuff in the sideboard. These decks at this point have mostly been figured out. They're probably like 3 or 4 cards different. It probably doesn't make that much of a difference what the differences are, but Grixis Shadow is one of the best decks, so we'll showcase it. It's just not a ton to talk about in terms of the differences in the list, but second place, Grixis Shadow. Third place, now we got something to talk about. This is Crabvine. For those of you who haven't seen this deck before, it is a self-mill deck. So we're playing Hedron Crab, Merfolk Secret Keeper, Otherworldly Gaze, Glimpse the Unthinkable, Stitcher Supplier as ways to mill ourselves. We're trying to mill over Gravecrawler, which you can cast from the graveyard, Narcomoeba, which comes back into play, Amalgam, which also can come back into play, milling over Vengevines, and we're trying to cast, 2 spells that can be, we have a bunch of 1-drops like Gravecrawler, Crab, Secret Keeper, all cast for 1 mana as a creature, and we have a Wonder as well, which can give our creatures some evasion if our opponent has blockers, Creeping Chills. So there's basically, this is just trying to kind of shove all in on the self-mill and just trying to create this giant battlefield as early as possible. I like a lot of what's going on here, and some of the numbers look like they're pretty tested, like 3 Narcomoeba. Rotting Rats is an interesting one. It is a zombie, so it gets back Gravecrawler, and it also triggers Prized Amalgam, and you can discard a Vengevine to it. So Rotting Rats is kind of a cool addition here. And then moving on to the sideboard, we got Force of Negation, which helps against the combo decks, which we've seen a lot of. Natural State Assassin's Trophy to blow up the anti-graveyard hate. Leyline of the Void against other graveyard decks. And then 2 Tarmogoyf, which I find kind of strange because this deck is obviously, the idea of Tarmogoyf is you're bringing it in as kind of like your plan B against graveyard hate, but it's kind of weird that if your opponent has Leyline, your Goyfs get smaller because you don't have your own graveyard, so that's something to think about there. But yeah, just some additional threats in the sideboard definitely can't hurt, but that's third place, Crabvine. Fourth place, we got something a little interesting here. This is Blue-Black Control. So we are a Lurrus of the Dream Den deck, and our creature base is, Snapcaster, Turok, which both are good to rebuy with Lurrus, and then just every single counterspell and removal spell that you could possibly imagine. Blood Chief, Thirst, some discard spells, 4 Charm, cantrips, counter spells, drowns, fatal push, deluge to kind of keep, will help you go long. You got Hall of Storm Giants and Castle of Vantress to get some, utility out of your lands. It's really cool that you get to be a control deck that only has to play 20 lands because you have so many cantrips and Mishra's Baubles with Lurrus. So I like that aspect. You get to jam more spells in your deck. That's kind of cool. And, 4 Spreading Seas in the sideboard to help against Urza Saga. You got a Chalice of the Void, mostly here for Cascade. Obviously, we don't want a Chalice on 1. Cling to Dust for Graveyard Hate, Flusterstorm, Dispute. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. So if you are into control and you don't want to play with blue-white, maybe this is a nice little different approach for you. But here in 4th place, blue-black control. In 5th place, we got Old Faithful. I can't tell if Tron is the kind of the good guys now policing the format, but this is mono green Tron. Pile of Karns, 4 of each, which definitely makes a lot of sense. 2 Ugins, we got an Emrakul, a Sundering Titan, a Walking Ballista. We're splitting up our big endgame threats because we have Sanctum of Ugin, so you can find Sanctum, play a big spell, and then you have the utility with Sanctum of Ugin here. Only 2 Worm Coils, kind of makes sense in the Solitude metagame, 2 Ulamogs, and then just all the ways to find Tron. Going down to 2 O-Stones, that's something worth noting. I want to see if we had a 3rd in the sideboard for Karn. We don't, but our Karn package is like Sundering Titan, Chalice, what else we got? Ballista, Bridge, Cage, Coding. Yeah, there's a really, really big Karn package here, but this is 5th place, Mono Green Tron. 6th place, here we are, we got some more Rhinos. This is, I think this is 1 card off of the list that I tried a few weeks back. I think I had -1 Subtlety plus 4th Bone Crusher Giant. This is with only 1 main deck Endurance, and that was just to make room for other stuff in the sideboard because you can't play a 16-card sideboard. I wanted to be able to have 4 Endurance in the 75. So I like a lot of what's going on here. I like, again, the split, Dead Gone, Prismari Command makes a lot of sense. The main deck Subtlety, I was not a huge fan of, so I might, consider cutting that. I just don't think the card is that good in general. It's good against exactly Teferi, but other than that, there's not really that much Amulet Titan going around, so I'm not a huge fan of it. But I do like most of what's going on here, and again, this is probably my favorite deck in the format. One thing I will say, Gemstone Caverns I would highly recommend playing, so I think 2 copies is right. I've experimented with 3, but I like 2. But yeah, 6th place, Team of Rhinos. The 7th place, I always have a really hard time fitting these Yorion decks all on the screen, so it kind of, we had to make the text smaller, and it's taking up more space, but 7th place, we got some 4-color Yorion. I think most of what's going on here is pretty standard stuff at this point. 3 Witness, 2 Fury, there's some small differences here. 3 Counterspell, 2 Ephemerate, 4 Abundant Growth, 4 Spreading Seas, but these decks are again similar to the Death Shadow decks. They've kind of already been figured out, so they're not really that different in terms of the small minute choices. But yeah, so we won't go over a ton of that stuff. 4 Veils in the sideboard, that's definitely a statement. I don't know if that's common, but I like that actually quite a bit. And the Emrakul in the sideboard's kind of cool. The 4th counter spell, an extra Fury and Ephemerate, which I kind of like because there's certain matchups where you really want access to Fury Ephemerate. So I kind of like those changes. But yeah, 7th place, 4-color Yorion. And for our 8th place deck list, we have more 4-color Yorion. I want to apologize for the person who played the deck list. I have a display caption. I could not actually fit their name on the screen with the entire deck list. The person is Kurusu. Kurusu, but that is the user who top-aided with this deck list. I apologize, I could not fit your name on the screen. There's too many cards in this deck. This is a little bit different than the previous version of Yorion we've seen. So there's a ton of one-ofs, which I believe means we have Eladamri's Call. We have 1 Accord, 1 Eladamri's Call, and then a pile of one-ofs, 1 Deputy, 1 Endurance, a Fury, a Charmaw, a Skyclave, a Wall of Omens, 4 Wall of Blossoms, and it looks like we've replaced the Spreading Seas with those as our ETB draw card stuff for Yorion, which is interesting. Only 1 Abundant Harvest. There's no Abundant Growths. That's also very, very interesting. Just a ton of one-ofs here. 2 Witness, 2 Ice Fang, 3 Seasoned Pyromancer. I kind of like that one too, good in the 4-color mirrors. And then sideboard, some more Charmaws, the Emrakul, 2 Veils, just a lot of stuff going on. So if you're into 4-color, if you play those kinds of decks, maybe give this one a shot. Too much for my brain to comprehend right now. But yeah, that's going to round out our top 8 here for the Super Qualifier. Now that we've looked at all 3 of the decks, let's kind of go ahead and throw them on the screen so we can take a look at the bigger picture. All right, and this is kind of where we are at. This is what everything looks like, and we have it all up on the screen. So one thing you'll notice here, the Saturday Challenge, which is in the top left, and the Sunday Super Qualifier on the top right, a lot of companions. So Saturday had 5, the Super Qualifier also had 5, but the Sunday Challenge only had 1. So that's definitely worth noting. I think that the overall number of companions in the top 8 are steadily, or not steadily, but slightly decreasing. So that's definitely a good sign. The one other thing you'll notice here, 3 top 8s, no hammer time, which is crazy. There's definitely some on the outside of the top 16s and top 32s, which you can take a look at the deck list. I'll put links for all 3 of the events in the description below if you want to check those out. And there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. Both the challenges were won by 2 relatively, unknown decks, Glimpse Combo and Blue-White Affinity. We have some really cool stuff going on here. We got Lantern, Resurgence of Tamer Rhinos, 2 across 2 top 8s. We got a lot of different combo decks like Belcher and Oops All Spells doing well. There was a Crabvine deck in the top 8 of the PTQ. Mono Green Tron. So, other than like the Grixis Shadow 4-color Yorion stuff, which is showing up, but not even in crazy numbers, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. Like there was the Blue-Black Control deck, which looks really interesting. Some, a little bit of Resurgence of Murktide that had a decent weekend too. So overall, I think the format is in a pretty good spot right now. I don't know if there's necessarily anything I want to change about the format. Maybe Lurrus is still a little too much to handle, but I don't know. Maybe the format can adapt to it. But, this is definitely different than what we've seen before, so it's a little breath of fresh air. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button. Let me know in the comments section below what's your favorite deck in Modern and what you thought of the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content, and I will see you guys in the next video.